session to order. Welcome everyone, and thank you for tuning into tonight's work session. Work sessions are conducted to provide the City Council with introductory information, to have opportunities to provide staff guidance, and to facilitate initial conversations on a topic. No votes are taken. As such, there's not an opportunity provided for members of the community to provide comments or to ask questions during the work session. Those interested in providing comments to the City Council can do so during the regular meeting at 7 o'clock. All right, up first, Deputy Ross Heinz.
Yes.
Sheriff's Department, come on up.
Okay. Would you like to sit right
You
here?
can sit right there.
Okay, perfect.
There should be
I feel like
a
I'm-
little, oops. Sit down.
Okay.
Make yourself at home. There's the green light should
It's
be
on.
Okay.
It's on. Yep.
Perfect. Well, welcome to Carver.
Thank you.
Tell us about yourself.
Well, I grew up in the Lakeville area. I graduated high school in about 2010. Went to Mankato State University to get my degree.
I know I went there.
And I completed my degree in 2014. I started applying for jobs for a couple years. Wasn't getting anywhere. Ended up getting married and having kids. Then I kind of put that in the back burner for a while, for a couple years. Then I decided that I want to get back into law enforcement. So this past year and a half ago, I started applying again. I had to retake my post exam and all that stuff, and then applied here and got hired and been here for about 6 months.
Great. Well, welcome.
Thank you.
Because I like to get to know new folks better, I think Brent gave you a heads up. We like to play
He did.
Two truths and a lie. I like it because
I
it's
thought about it on
interactive.
the way here, so
Okay, on the way here.
it's a good one.
Okay, go ahead. You have the floor.
Okay, so it's two truths and a lie. Okay. My oldest daughter played with a Minnesota Vikings daughter one day.
Okay.
I have 4 kids, and hockey is my favorite sport.
Isn't it everybody's?
Yeah.
Okay,
So-
everybody, show of hands. Everybody gets to play along.
Who likes hockey?
Oh, nobody thinks hockey's your favorite. Well, pretty evenly mixed. Which one's a lie?
I have 3 kids.
Oh, all right.
Yeah.
How old are they?
So I have all girls.
Okay.
5, 3, and 10 months.
Wow. Congratulations.
So this is actually kind of a break right now. Right now, coming here. My wife got kind of jealous that I get to leave for a little bit just to come out here. So
Carver's your oasis.
yeah.
Well, welcome. It's really great to have you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Do you guys have any
Yeah.
questions?
Do you have any
Nice
questions?
You
meeting
want
you,
to
Ross.
grill him a little bit more?
Oh.
Because
No, I figured hockey was absolutely.
Mayor Johnson, do you want to bring Commander Wolene up? Maybe he wants to play as well.
Yeah.
sure, Commander Wolene, why don't you come up? I'm sure they.
I don't know that I was as prepared as.
I was going to say, Brent's enjoyed this.
Yeah, but you got seniority.
I know.
Brent's enjoyed this so much, you must
Yeah.
have nothing prepared.
Oh, boy. Let's see, I have
We'll give you a second.
two truths and a.
Two truths
And a
and
not so truth.
Okay.
That's the truth.
Let's see.
So how'd you like growing up in Mankato?
Lakeville.
From the Mankato.
Lakeville.
Right.
Yeah. Growing up as I became a young little high schooler to a college person.
Got it.
And enjoyed it. It was fine. It was a college experience.
Mankato.
Mankato.
Good law. It's a good law enforcement
Yeah, there's a lot of they
school.
put a lot of people through law enforcement. Nowadays, I don't quite know what they are for what the numbers are nowadays, but I know back in like 2010, I felt like every person I spoke to was going into it. So
Yep.
I don't know what it was like.
We're
now.
in the Midwest, but I'm sure it's a fine school. Commander Wolene, you ready?
I think so.
Okay.
I think I can try to, let's see. I've been to Afghanistan, Germany, Panama, and Guatemala. I have numerous cats. And
Numerous.
I'm originally from Carlston, Minnesota.
You don't sound like
There's not,
that person
well,
to me.
just a few.
Yeah,
folks.
no one is.
Just only
I'm-
Harry thinks
I'm
you have
about
cats.
I'm allergic to them.
So how many do you have?
None.
Numerous.
So, growing up in northern Minnesota on a farm, we had farm cats all over, and wouldn't have known I was allergic until after not being around them. And so, anyway, yeah,
right.
bad deal.
Welcome.
Yeah,
Well,
thanks for coming out.
Yeah, thank you for coming out.
Yeah, no problem.
I just want
Welcome
to say
to Carver.
we're pleased to have Ross join our team. He has been with us about 6 months now, like he said, started in the fall. A couple of weeks ago, successfully completed field training, Solar Patrol certified, and has come to serve in the city of Carver in the vacant PM shift that we had. So we're excited for him to join. Surprised he didn't talk about football. I thought that would have been your favorite sport.
I like all sports.
That's generally
So-
a question we ask. So, who do you cheer for?
If you say Packers, you're fired.
Stop it.
Vikings. That is. I'm also. I'm not against the Packers.
Okay.
I can't be too mean to them because they got rid of their best receiver. So
Yeah, but
they got Odell Beckham. But
it's a rebuilding year.
yes.
This is,
Every year for the Vikings.
you said it's football?
Huh?
It's football, you were
Okay.
saying?
All right, gentlemen, thank you. We've got a pretty big work session agenda, so we're going to move on. Have a good evening.
Thanks,
Bye.
guys. Welcome back, Carver.
All right, moving on, item number 3, the water tower coating maintenance project. Mr. Lamas. Good evening.
On our way to talk about water.
Is your mic, can you pull your mic up, just because we hear that it's hard to hear on the Zoom sometimes, so,
Got it.
thank you.
Yes. All right, we're going to talk water tower maintenance, and so not the most exciting topic, but unfortunately, it's one of those things like getting car tires. You have to do it every once in a while, and you spend money on something that you hardly notice, except a little bit of rust goes away. So we'll talk about why you would do that and why it's becoming something to talk about. So we'll give you a little bit of background on the tower itself, recoating examples of what actually is the process and what's being done and why, and then we'll talk about some opportunities associated with it, some branding, master planning branding opportunities that had come up, what ways to brand the city of Carver, and then some recommended next steps. So first thing is what do you have out there? It's a steel tower constructed in 2007, 750,000 gallon water tower. It's been holding up quite well, running around 15 years. So what you have is paint from the early 2000s, which lasts about 15 to 20 years. The good news is some of the newer paints, as with all things, technology advances, the newer paints are better, have a longer lifespan, but some of the paints used in the early 2000s, if you can get 15, 20 years out of them, that was a good outcome. So it's held up quite well. So the paint is ultimately there just to inhibit rust. It's a steel tower, so that's what we're trying to prevent is rust. That's why a lot of these steel structures out there, they have coat after coat after coat of paint. You go from some of those bridges out there, steel bridges, they go from one end of the bridge and paint it and back to the other, and they're just a constant painting cycle with some of the structures, Golden Gate, constant painting. And that's what they're doing, is they're just keeping the steel from weathering. And so same thing with the tower. So what happens if you don't paint it? Ultimately, you just get into structural repairs. And that's where the numbers start to go up in a hurry. So once you get into welding steel and things to that nature, the numbers start to increase. So as unfortunate as it is to spend money on painting over and over again, it is still cheaper than actually getting a new tower or repairing it structurally. So other examples, there's the Blaine Tower. You can see that one had gone a while without painting here. This is some live pictures that we took from our inspections of some of these other facilities where they're starting to get to that point of structural concerns. You start to rust around the pipes, and once that breaks loose, you're welding it and putting new steel up there, so then the numbers start to increase. That's what we're trying to avoid. So this is what your tower looks like. This is inside of it. It's actually in very good shape on the outside. The paint is held up very well on the exterior. This would really be a good coating for many years on the outside. On the inside, it's starting to deteriorate. So the good news is we would consider this to be in the urgent category. Consider this to be, it's starting to snowball. And once the rust gets going, it continues, and it just will continue to propagate until it starts to get into a few minor touch-up for structural repairs. As it deteriorates, it'll start to get into more significant ones. And then what your goal is to push it as far as you possibly can before you hit that threshold where you're actually getting the welders out and replacing things. So you obviously don't want to do it early. You just want to catch it before it turns into structural. So the timing suggestion is fairly open. It's a pretty decent window here. They feel you've probably got a good 5-year window on this. It's probably going to come down to some financial planning more than anything. Again, we wouldn't recommend going past 5 years at this point, based on what we're seeing. It'll start to get into some more costly repairs at that point. But we would say anytime within the next 5 year, you're probably going to be in decent shape based on the condition. It's you can just see it starting to go. So.
Yeah, I have a question on
Yes.
the side for the timing. Is it recoating the interior or exterior?
Usually when they go and recoat the tower, you absolutely have to do the interior. The exterior is usually done along with it, so that your paint is aging at the same rate. Otherwise, you end up recoating the inside, and then the exterior might deteriorate in 10 years, and then you come back and recoat the exterior, and then you're constantly having to recoat. So usually it's most cost effective to go recoat the tower. However, it is one of those things that we would entertain. If there's value there, we would really just go after what needs to be done. In most cases, it's the outcome is recoating the tower because they're up there and they're going after it, and it's the mobilization and the whole exercise that tends to be a lot of cost. So here's some examples of other towers. You can do a lot of different things with the recoating process, which this brings us to some of the upcoming opportunities here, but you can do any number of things, any number of artwork and branding labels on the tower. The costs, it's expensive. Again, it's not a very fun project. It's like I said, it's like getting tires. You don't see them, but you need them. It's very significant here to keep the tower from deteriorating structurally. That being said, it's being talked about now for some financial planning. That's the whole purpose here, is to not get this to the point of saying in 2 years you've got some urgent issues. I think we have a pretty long window on this one, or we can start thinking ahead. You're going to have some bond excesses that you could consider. You're going to have some fund balances that could be set aside for this over coming years. There's different opportunities to financially plan for this, and there's different time frames that we would have based on what works best with your finances. And so we would consider this to be an early planning discussion on what we're seeing, and tying that into the opportunity side of things, though this is also something that was mentioned in master planning as a branding opportunity. So when it is to be painted, what would it look like? And so that's the whole point of this, is once you're up there painting, the color and the logos, that's a very minor consequence on the cost here. You see they're going to be putting the tarp up, they're going to be going all the way up the side of the tower. Picking the paint colors isn't going to be the driver here to the costs. Most of this is stripping the tower down and getting up there, mobilizing it, screening the entire area, so that there's not paint spray. Logos are a very standard part of this here. They've got stencils, and that's very typical practice at this point. I mean, very elaborate artwork can start to get into some additional costs, but for them it's just what's the template, and then they cut the stencils and they paint it. So you have opportunities to decide what do you want this to look like, and this is just some early discussions about what it could look like when it's done. It doesn't mean it has to happen next year. It's just giving everybody opportunity to brainstorm, what does this water tower need to be to reflect Carver. So just a couple early ideas. So the actions on
Dan?
this, go ahead.
Can you go back to that last slide? I think you made a really good comment during one of our meetings about painting the kind of underside of the bowl a dark color. Can you talk about why that might be something we would want to do?
The underside of the bowl.
Yeah, rather than doing it white, to do it a darker
You
color.
mean the tower itself, the pillar itself? Yeah.
No, the underside of the bowl, just so that it wouldn't show mildew, etc.
Oh yeah, I mean the darker colors do better with dirt, grime, and well, as Brent said, it hides the dirty things a little bit better. So you know, kind of like the white
Technical
walls
term.
with kids' fingerprints. I guess in a water tower world, it's you know, white will pick up dirt and anything else that's blowing in the wind. So yeah, there's some advantages to some of the darker colors. So that certainly can be part of the strategy here.
Is it
looking nice?
specific just to that bottom portion, or throughout it's better to paint a darker color?
Well, I, in my opinion, I think it's both. I think it's underside of the bowl, and the pillar's got some advantage too. But again,
The bowl will, at least in my experience, will tend to show the dirt first. If you look at even Tower 1 up by the existing plant, it'll show it. If you a nerd like me, you'll drive around and see people's water towers and see like it's that black mildew underneath their bowl. So, and every once in a while, as a part of our maintenance, we'll have someone pressure wash that off. But with a lighter color, that's going to show even earlier than it would in a typical setting.
yeah. So there you go. There's Blaine's tower. You can see all the dark stuff on the bottom side.
Yeah.
So mold. Oh yeah. It's just no, I'm not one of those folks who's too scared of that. But yeah, I would say it's a lot of dirt. All right. Well, as far as actions and next steps here, it's a pretty small list. There's really nothing that you have to act on right away. It's planning. It's financial planning. It's a big number. It's a big piece of infrastructure and a big cost to go after it. And part of the challenges right now is the numbers are higher than they typically are for towers, because as with most things that you're seeing, it's up. Paint is up. It's up a good 10-20%. So, given that the majority of this is the cost of the material, it's certainly adding to what we would estimate over the period here. So, we will, to your question, be exploring whether or not you can just paint the interior, whether or not there's some other options. I would say it all depends on kind of the feedback and the goals here, but ultimately our primary plan is just to protect the steel. So that's the ultimate need from our perspective. The rest of this gets into the financials and some of the branding goals. And then develop a financial plan program next year that would show up in your CIP. And then finally, it's the recoat and the program year.
One of the things we were talking about this is, you know, if you remember, we saved some money on our well drilling by able to have 2 wells essentially in one location. And I know we're getting into our long-term financial plan process this summer, but initially, I think we'd be in a better position to try to use that money to try to take on this project, whether it's in 2023 or 4. It just doesn't seem to be appealing on its face to try to go out in a future year and bond just to do a water tower maintenance project. So if we can try to incorporate as many, use as much of our fund balance in water through that cost savings to do a project like this that's unusually high for a maintenance project. That's kind of our initial planning. So we're looking for feedback on that, and two, if you have any initial reactions to some of the designs that you saw, if there's something that you liked or really didn't like, it would help us to try to kind of narrow kind of the scope of what that might look like going forward.
Thoughts, Council? Christie, looks like you're ready.
Sure. When it comes to funding, so later
in the meeting tonight, we were talking about Southwest Christian and the bonding that we're doing with them. Now, if I remember correctly, in there it talks about that does bring our access to certain bonding numbers down, right? We're not going to be able to bond.
The city has access to $10 million per year of bank qualified bonding authority, which
Okay.
just gets you a certain interest rate or preferred interest rate, for lack of a better word. We're not intending to bond for any projects this year, so that should be somewhat moot, because
Okay.
in 2023, we'll again have another $10 million in bank qualified status for bonding authority.
Okay, all right. And I realize doesn't affect us in the way of that we're not on the hook for it, but if it brings down our borrowing capacity, I want to make sure that we're not shooting ourselves in the foot ahead of time when we're going to come back and now we need something and we can't afford to bond for it.
Right.
Okay. My other comment actually I have a question, because I am not the guru of water towers. So when you go to paint this and you have to drain the tower, right? And then what does that do for our water supply for the town and the timing of that with summer and things like that?
It's a good question, and one of the reasons why we have the system sized the way we do. I'll remember from our water tower discussions, the entire water system is set up to meet your capacity with your largest supply elements out of service. So you have enough capacity built in that something can be brought down and we can serve it elsewhere. And so like a well can go down, and this is the same thing. We have to plan that into the rest of your system,
Okay.
to try and manage it. But yeah, they have to draw the water down to paint it.
Okay, just because last year we had the drought, and if we were to do that in the height of July for the painting, we might be in trouble when it comes to water. I don't know, Chad, if you have any comments on what that might look like for us.
Like Dan said, we're prepared for that in our processes. Were you asking strictly like how would we keep water in the system?
Well, and also
If the tower
timing.
was
Are we
drained?
talking about timing too, so that if we're thinking it's July, maybe July is not our best month to do this in, the two hottest months, July and August,
Right.
so that we don't end up having to put watering restrictions on because we're having the tower done, and how long does it go down for?
I think we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves. I think we're just looking for tonight, if we want to move ahead with this so that we can start planning for it financially, correct? What were the two things you asked for? And preliminary design and.
Yeah, we're just looking for some additional feedback. We're open to taking any comments and questions.
This is
that
more
you have.
just function. I don't
Yeah.
understand how this works. So if it's something that when you contract out for it, do you get to kind of pick and when you want it to go down? They don't just, we bond for it and we're at the mercy of the company who we hire?
Yeah, I mean, we'll bid it, and we would basically have a completion date on it, and there is a window. I mean, obviously, as you know, painting outside, and when in our Arctic winters here, it doesn't work out too well. So-
Really?
So yeah, we'd have a window throughout the year, and yeah, I mean it's a fair point. You do try and avoid your peaks in the middle of July, but there's a window outside of that we would say, all right, here's your start, here's your completion date, and then past that, I mean the entire painting process is usually under a month, so they can get up and in and out of there. So.
And just to be clear, our hope is to not bond for this.
Okay. All right, and then my final one is we'll just comment on the aesthetics quick.
Gesundheit.
Yeah. The first three, these are a little hard on my brain. They seem they're a little much. And also when we're looking at this, Carver, our water tower logo is green, so having, I guess I'll call it the stem of the water tower being blue. I'm not sure how blue's kind of getting pushed in here rather than having that be green if we were to go with a full color on that part. If we go to the second page that has the pictures, I actually really like the more plain one on the left there that has the bottom, again, coated, the blue color is fine there. I think that's great, and it hides a little bit of that underdirt that we know gets right there. But like I said, I guess if I had to choose right now and looking at these, that would be my initial one to go to. It's very simple. I don't know about having this huge blue behemoth, what could be in someone's backyard, or having to see that thing. I don't know. I don't like it. But if we did, then I would also, if the council preferred to have that colored. I guess I would prefer to maybe look at having that green to go with the Carver green of the water tower actual logo too. That's all I have.
All right.
So I know you talked about the paint technology is getting better so it lasts longer, but your comment about the interior has a greater deterioration from ice movement and chlorine, and I have no idea what that means, but is there anything else we can do during this maintenance process just to help the interior last a little bit longer other than paint, or is this just what we need to do?
Well, not a whole lot we can do about the comments of the ice movement. It basically degrades the interior because it's abrasive against the paint, and so the best thing you can do is basically have a good well-coated tower. Without moving south here, we're kind of stuck on the.
I know we're
the
kind of
whole
stuck
ice
with
thing,
the
and
weather.
then it moves around and it grinds at the paint, and so I'm not. I guess I'm not that much of an expert on this specific. I guess design specification that where I could talk to our staff and they might thicken the coating around certain parts of the tower, things to that nature. But as far as the chlorine, no. I mean, that's just, it's going to be more abrasive than the exterior. So you have those two things that are kind of strikes against you.
Yeah, I know. I didn't know if there's anything else. I just wanted to ask.
No, and I can get back to you on that too.
Okay.
There's probably others that can answer that better than I can.
Okay. I like the idea of using the excess from the water treatment bonding. I do not have strong feelings about how the water tower looks, other than I don't like the last one with it all blue at the top. I prefer it to be white at the top in some fashion. Lori?
I have a question on the possible source, including the bonding excess from the water treatment facility. Do we know, like, when we would know if there is excess funds? Like, and I'm sorry, really, I didn't look. I was trying to find, like, when we anticipate that project done.
Yeah, so it'll be a moving target until the water treatment plant and some of the other connected projects to the initial bond are completed. But we do know that we had significant savings with our well drilling operation, and so the combination of not having those projects done, the cost of paint due to kind of the supply chain issues, and just kind of the overall condition of the tower advances this, gives us flexibility to advance this out a few years. That said, we wanted to get it in front of you, one, because
What do you mean by advances out a few years?
means we could push this out instead of doing it like this year, 2023. The well tower maintenance project, if you will, isn't included in our long-term financial plan. So we wanted to introduce this independently of the long-term financial plan. And then two, as Dan mentioned, the branding of it was contained within your strategic planning initiative. So the combination of that is why you're seeing this independent.
So it's not, maybe I should have asked a different question. So it sounds like it's not a matter as much of like, okay, once we're done with this project, we'll see if we have access, even though we anticipate it. So it's not like it's more, if there is excess funds, does it have to be allocated at a certain time, or that's something where we could do it?
There's a period. I don't have it in front of me. I know Lynn did that research. So we know that we have the opportunity to use funds. And I'll kind of continue to talk about this as like project savings because of the well. We bonded for the amount that we thought the projects were going to cost, but we're likely to incur savings just based on the construction that occurred for the projects. And in any event, even if the project savings doesn't equal this project amount, I would consider that a healthy down payment, where we could take project savings along with fund balance in the water fund to do this project, as opposed to, in 2028 saying, okay, we've stretched this out long enough, but now we're going to bond for $1.2 million to clean the water, to repaint the water tower. This seems like a more aggressive way to handle a big maintenance project. That makes sense?
It does, yeah,
okay.
because what I want to I wouldn't be comfortable being in a situation where, let's, you know, say end of 2022, we find out, okay, there's excess funds, and then in 2023, we have to use them. But it doesn't sound like.
Yeah, we can get into that during our long-term financial plan. There is a sunset to it. It's to my recollection, it's not the end of 2023. We do have some runway to use those, but it's not ongoing. At some point, we've talked about this with different projects. If you don't spend project funds in a certain amount of time, then they have to go towards the debt service for the bond fund.
All right, sounds like more information to come, but thanks for letting me answer those questions. Glenn?
I'm going in the weeds. On the removal of the interior rust, does that include sandblasting the whole inside out, or the inside, and then coating it with your marine-based epoxy, whatever?
Yeah, again, I'm not the paint expert. I've got some other people in the company that do this all the time. But as far as stripping it, yeah, they're going to strip it, and there's different ways that they do it. But that's part of the deal is when we look at these is, do we have to take it all down to bare steel, or can we just do touch-ups and recoat? And it's one of those tripping points, and we're thinking at this point that it's probably going to strip it down. So
That way you get a good seal on it.
yes, once you get it down to steel, you can get a good. The newer paints, you can be looking at a 25-year window on this, and these towers should last 75 years if they're maintained. So
Okay. Do we have plans for the other water tower as well? Didn't we do that not too long ago?
Yeah, the water tower 1 was repainted in
12 or 13?
it was repainted. It was repainted within the last 10 years or so.
Okay.
Because it used to be like a baby blue, and now it's tan.
And it has our new logo on it. It's not
Correct.
old writing.
That's it for my questions, but if I liked any of this, any of the options, I like number 1 with the number 3 base. So I have the water towers underneath on the number 1, first one,
see,
instead of the waves.
the left, this one with what?
Number 1, the one on the left,
Okay.
with the water towers from the lower part on there instead of the waves.
Oh, I see. Okay, so you like the top of number 1 and the bottom of number 3. Okay.
Perfect.
Just so that we're clear, and maybe for folks who are watching at home, this is the tower up by Fleet Farm, correct? And then for the numbers, the estimate, that's 2022 money and not 2027 money?
It's inflated with some contingencies here, but because we haven't picked a program year yet, we're kind of shooting in the middle.
Okay.
If we said it was going to be 2028 that we want to plan for, we might inflate it a little bit more, especially now. So
Okay. Is this anywhere in our current long-term financial plan?
No.
Okay.
And we'd be no more than 3 years out from this. So, the back half of our long-term financial plan, that would change our financing flexibility with the use of existing resources.
Okay.
So we're likely looking at, I would say the sweet spot for this is 2024.
Okay. Thank you. I think I share everybody's desire. If we can pay for this without bonding, that would be my preference. If we're able to work that out with the money from the water tower, or the well savings. And then as far as design, I wasn't super excited about having kind of the stem painted until you mentioned the benefits to that. So I like that idea now. I don't care to see the water tower on the stem. I do think I like the examples that we're seeing with the stem being blue. I think it kind of blends into the skyline a little bit more. I think a green water tower would really kind of stick out horribly. And since it's in our color scheme, I like the blue being the dominant or the primary color in there. I think in general, I don't think that this has to be a super ornate design. I'd love to see our logo in there. I'd love to see something that would make the paint appear to last longer before it gets kind of grungy and grimy. So if we have to do a dark color to accomplish that, and if we can have a couple of colors on it without increasing the price too much more, I think that would be great. But I think I do like the idea of having it painted a color on the stem and the bottom of the bowl to keep it from looking gross after a handful of years. So that is my feedback. Do you
Okay.
have what you need from us?
I do.
Okay.
We will take that into this year and start to think ahead. So,
Great.
again, nice time to talk early before there's issues and that we have to act on right away. So that's how we like to do it.
Super.
Nothing's pressing. So.
Courtney, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
When you're talking about the darker stem, what do you, for me, having 3 water tower logos on a water tower might be a little overkill. So I guess if we were going to go with the blue stem, we already have the city of Carver blasted across the top and the water tower on the top. To lessen the busyness of it, I don't think it just changed. Okay, so I would be actually more in favor than of not having the logos on the stem of it.
Oh, yeah, I'm not advocating for that.
Okay.
Sorry if that wasn't clear.
Okay,
No.
I just was making sure.
No, I don't, I think the stem could be fine by itself. I don't hate the waves, but I don't think the water tower, I think having the water tower on it makes it look too busy.
I also think that. Not that that dark stem's my favorite, but I think that
Carver's a busy happening place.
water tower, water tower, water tower.
It's, and
It's
it's
a
on a
happening
water
place.
tower.
It's busy.
And it's on a water tower. I don't care for it. I would be fine with just a plain color, and if that's blue, I think
Plain.
that would blend in better and be a little bit more complimentary.
All right.
Okay.
Yeah. Good feedback. Thank you.
Yes.
That's it.
All right, moving on, item number 4, the development agreement overview. Mr. Anderson.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Let me just see if I can share. All right. So just a quick bit of introductory comments, I guess. The reason for the development agreement overview tonight is one thing that I'd been discussing with staff. When I came to Carver, I realized that it wasn't the status quo to have the council review and really approve development agreements for plats and other developments that are happening in the city. And that's a little out of the ordinary. I think there's also a lot of value to, at the very least, which I think most cities in Minnesota do, just approving it before you're signing a development agreement. There could be an argument by a developer if we ever get to the point of trying to enforce an agreement. And I think it's unlikely, but it's a tiny bit of risk saying the council should have approved this before you're entering a very significant agreement with the developer. So I'm trying to work this city toward that in that direction, and you will see it tonight with the Carver Commons second plat and the next steps, childcare development, that we actually have the development agreement on the agenda for your approval as well. I also think it's a really good way to streamline development agreements in general, because once the city council then approves a final plat, we'll sort of be, in many respects, ready to finalize the agreement, sign it, and get it out the door and let these developers start. So hopefully it's something that we can work toward. I think staff and the guys from Bolton and Mink have been really great about that suggestion, and I just expect it to be maybe more of a commonplace moving forward. So what I wanted to do tonight was just give the council an overview about what development agreements are, what they contain. They're long documents. They're very refined by the time you'll see them. And so, there's going to be little room, if any, for, more back and forth with the developers and their attorneys by the time you approve them. Not to say it can't happen if there's really need for it, but I do think it's important that you, make that formal step of actually approving them after we get to that point. So feel free to interrupt at any point with questions. So Really what a development agreement is, just the basics. It's a contract between the city and a developer for how they're going to implement whatever development they want to do, whether it's commercial, residential. The basic information in every agreement are going to be the parties, always the city and a developer. Sometimes it'll be a different property owner that will be a third party if the property is not owned by the developer. That's sort of rare, but it happens on occasion. They always describe the development property itself because these documents are recorded against that property and they run with the land. And they give an overview about what type of development it is, whether it's residential or commercial, or in some cases, multi-use. And then they talk about what land use approvals have been secured by the developer in any given case. And then last but not least, they have a lot of big picture things. Phasing. Timber Creek, for example, is an example of a phased development that you saw. So with Timber Creek, and there'll be another development agreement coming to the council soon with their next bite at the apple. But that's a phased development where they do chunks at a time. So all development agreements include information about the improvements that need to be installed before the development itself can happen, before all the physical improvements can happen. They will provide an outline of what improvements are going to be considered public, and when I say public, I mean those that are going to ultimately be accepted by the city after they're constructed and maintained. They also, a few examples, I guess, of public improvements are streets, sidewalks, sewers, sewer and water main, public trails, public stormwater facilities. But there are also private improvements that need to be constructed by developers as well in order to make sure their development works, and those are going to be defined in the agreements as well. And then who will construct the improvements? Most of the time, cities say, look, if you want to develop in Carver, you can do so, but you're going to have to build X, Y, and Z, and you're going to have to build it at your expense. There are situations every once in a while where cities will maybe take on some of that responsibility for various reasons, but it doesn't always happen. Agreements also include a lot of construction details, and included are what we refer to, and I use plans and quotation marks because it's usually a defined term in the agreements, but it's formal plans and specs for the described improvements, and we always want to reference those specifically. They're usually many pages long, referenced by the engineering firm that put them together, sheet numbers, dates, and before they're finalized and approved, before we ever allow a developer to go out and put shovels in the ground, those go through a very thorough review by the city engineer, public works, planning staff, my office, to make sure that it all makes sense and that it fits, what they want to build actually fits and not only makes sense for their development, but makes sense long-term for potentially other developments nearby and other things like that. And then there will be language about revisions to the plans if necessary, how those would be accommodated, whether it requires written approval from the engineer, city engineer that is, or anyone else. There is language about how we make that work. There's also then construction activities that we talk about in these agreements, schedules, sequencing, timelines. We usually impose requirements on developers for when they can start and when they have to finish improvements by. There are pretty strict requirements about contractors. We don't just let them go out and hire whomever they can get the best price from, but we want to make sure those contractors are reputable, and if we've had issues with them before in the city or our engineers maybe have dealt with those folks in the past and had bad experiences with them, we would have the right to say, look, we don't want this contractor coming in and installing all this water main, which will eventually be our problem if they screw up. We'd rather use somebody else. Probably happens not too often, but maybe every once in a while they actually have to rely on that language. And then just overall requirements that are going to apply through the construction phase itself, like parking and cleaning up debris, haul routes, signage requirements, and then what happens actually during construction from our engineer's standpoint or the standpoint of whomever is inspecting the improvements. A lot of times we say you'll have to pay for on-site inspections over the course of all this development because we want to make sure you're doing it right. So we would send our engineers out to make sure that is actually happening, and there's language in the agreement about that too. The final really important element of development agreements is the financial securities. These are details that we always require that say you have to provide us money for the unlikely event that you go belly up, or the unlikely event that something else happens and you stop. We don't want a giant hole left on a property. We don't want half of a sewer line extending from one area to another. We make them provide a financial security in the form usually of a letter of credit. Sometimes they do cash escrow if they can afford it. That we can go to the bank, utilize that money, and then go finish work if we really needed to. Those amounts for what those securities are, they're calculated based on, it's a pretty detailed analysis of an estimate of all the public improvements usually that they have to construct, multiplied by 1.25. So we take 125% of the public improvement estimate. I'm going to skip through a few of these things just because it's pretty standard language, but the one I want to make sure we talk about is the warranty. So beyond the financial security that is sort of meant to be used during construction, we also require all their contractors to provide warranties for post-construction, usually a year, maybe two, and that say if something fails in the first year or two, we can rely on the developer to work with that contractor to go and make sure that they trigger the warranty clause and come back out, fix it, address it. If they don't do it, again, we can always go out and do that work, and we have the ability to then assess the development property for those costs if we don't have any immediate financial way to pay for it through a letter of credit or another security. And then lastly, just some miscellaneous things. It always is going to have remedies for if the developer goes back on its word and doesn't do something. We include language about park dedication and other fees, like Carver has a siren fee. We have storm sewer charges. And then, every development's a little different. There might be specific things. If there's a private street, for example, we'll include language about private streets. If they're going to require shared access from another parcel, we'll always say we have to make sure you're going to have access long-term, so you have to record an access declaration against the neighboring parcel to make sure that's good and is perpetual and runs with the property. And then sometimes, I think we did this one with the last Timber Creek phase, they actually, since they were out there with contractors doing work, they did some improvements that we wouldn't have otherwise required them to do above and beyond what was necessary for their subdivision. And so there was some language about city reimbursement. If you go build, this component of Ironwood Drive, we'll give you some reimbursement for that because, it's not going to benefit your subdivision, but it's really important to us and it makes sense for us. It's really cost effective for us to have you do it. So again, that's just a quick overview of the, nuts and bolts of development agreements. They're really long, boring documents, kind of like the last 10 minutes of this discussion. I really just, I think it's important to introduce you to it because you're not used to seeing this. And I'm always going to be happy to answer questions if you have them. And if you have questions now, feel free to ask them. Like I said, we'll see the first one on tonight's agenda. So,
Does anyone have questions?
So can you speak to kind of the timing of when development agreements happen with the rest of the development process?
Yeah, so like I said at the beginning, historically in Carver, it's been final plat gets approved, and then staff is sort of working behind the scenes with the developer to negotiate the agreement.
Okay.
It can sometimes take a really long time because depending on the level of details and the scope of the development itself, there's a lot of very important things that need to go into that document, and there's back and forth between my office, a lot of times Aaron and and Dan are going to be involved. And then we not only deal with the developers, but sometimes we have their attorneys looking at these things, and depending on their level of scrutiny, we get some pushback on things. That doesn't happen as often as you would expect, which is a good thing, but it does happen. What we're trying to transition to is getting these development agreements ready to go at the time of final plat approval. And again, I think it's a goal that I would love for the city to get to at some point. But it's a big change for everybody. So I think we'll get there. But to answer your question, that sort of will vary between final plat and a couple months down the road.
And then do we typically start with the City of Carver template
Yes. So
versus the developer's template?
yes. So since I've been here in Carver, I've used your template, but we are actually in the process of revamping that.
Okay.
I think it's fine. There's no major issues with it, but I think there's some user friendliness that I can inject into the new document, and will be really helpful not only for the city but also for developers. It would be, I think, overall it would be easier to streamline the process if we had a better template. So yes, we always start with a previous document because these documents are so long it wouldn't make sense to start from scratch. But that template that you might see early on here with a few examples could change over the next few months.
Okay. I think it's helpful for me to understand that we're starting with our template, because as the council becomes more familiar with our template,
Yep.
it'll be easier for us to say, oh, here's the exception for this developer and here's why, right? And that, so we can really focus on those exceptions versus we know the rest of it is our standard template.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
I have a question. Dave, do you know, is this gonna be brought in front of the planning commission?
No, and there's no real need for that. So one thing that the Planning Commission always does see and are very involved in are the conditions that will tie to, or likely will tie to different approvals. And a lot of times these development agreements include those conditions. And so they're going to be very involved with what the end document will look like. They just won't see the actual document itself. And that's not atypical. That's pretty standard. The council is the governing body of the city that ultimately will be approving these and needs to approve it. So the planning commission will not see them.
Other questions? Go on. No questions from me? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dave.
And I just want to add that everyone laughs at me for
Can't wait to hear what you're gonna
nerding
say.
out about either statutes or case law or other things. Brent said that he drives around and looks at water towers, and nobody made fun of him for that. So I just wanted to go on record before the end of this work session
Thank you.
to point that out.
Okay.
Yes.
Noted.
Honeymoon's over now.
Comment was made at 6:24. Got it. Okay. Thank you. Up next, the community event discussion strategic plan initiative. Ms. Good. Welcome.
I'm the one that has to share a screen. I'm always quizzing people, are you sure you're ready?
Don't worry, we can talk about Brent's fondness of water towers if you'd like while we're waiting. Oh, he has one.
No, the first one that I ever worked
Dear
for,
diary.
it was like his pet peeve, and every time we'd go to a meeting, he'd point that out, so it's just like, I can't help it. So like, the Merritt children are tortured by that.
Brent, have you seen the Cosmos water tower with the spaceships on it?
It's a good one.
It's an interesting one, yes. It is.
It's special.
I know what we're doing this weekend.
All right, Brenda, I was trying to help you, but I'm worried we're going down that path. So save us with a community event discussion.
Sure. So with this weather turning nice occasionally, the sun peeking out, it does feel like we should be thinking about the summer. So it's good timing for this. One of the initiatives that the city council had adopted in 2021-22 for their initiatives was to coordinate welcome events in parks to promote community engagement and education with residents. So I was assigned that task. So to start out, I met with Aaron Smith, and then we also met with Chaska Parks and Rec and did some brainstorming. And we're at the point now where we want to come back to the city council and find out more. What did you envision with this strategic plan? We had some ideas, some great brainstorming ideas, but what does the council really want to see us proceed with? There we go. So before we get started, I just wanted to point out there are 3 large events that we do host in Carver. We have our spring safety event and bike rodeo, that's in May. And the fire department and the public services do an open house, generally in October. And then we also have our farmers market, which is Tuesdays from 3 to 6, July through September. And this year it'll be held at the Carver station. So what do you envision for this? We kind of came down to 4 categories of questions that we had for you. Location, date, time, activities, and a budget for that. So with location, when you put together this strategic plan, did you have something in mind specific to a location? We came up with a couple different options here, but I'm looking for the council's feedback as far as where you think this might happen.
Do you want us to go just?
Yeah, just really kind of open-ended discussion, just to give me some guidance.
Yeah, so I'll start because I think that this was my item that I was looking forward to. And I think what I was thinking to kind of take us back to a year and a half ago now, a year ago, seems like a while ago, is, you know, there are so many folks in Carver who are new within the last handful of years. So doing something that can kind of, a welcome to Carver, a promoting the sense of community. I'm wondering, and you went in the last slide, and you mentioned it, I'm maybe just throwing it out there and thinking out loud. I wonder if it doesn't have to be so much one large event or a handful of large events, and if it could be more, you know, what the city does at the fire department's open house is great, because there's kind of a city touch point between the fire station and public services. The bike rodeo, I don't know that there's as much of a city touch point of somebody staffing the, like, got questions on your water bill, come on up while you're here. But I think it would be good to kind of incorporate a City of Carver desk, and I think I'd be willing to help staff that. I don't want to speak out of turn for everybody else, but just kind of a, you know, I kind of think back to the Brookview situation where we've got residents who are all new to Carver within the last 3 years, and their first touch with the city is one where it's emotional and everybody's fired up, and they're probably not looking at it as a positive experience. I would love to be able to have more of a human face-to-face touch at events where people are probably already going. So if we have a booth at the farmer's market, if there's a booth at the bike rodeo, those kinds of things where folks can see people and meet, you know, city staff, council members, the mayor, et cetera. I think that would be hopefully kind of swing that pendulum to more of a positive experience and kind of planting that seeds of Carver's small town charm. I don't know. Thoughts, anybody else?
So are some of these, when we're talking about this, I just want to clarify, you had met with Chaska too. Do we still have that in our agreement that they're supposed to hold a number of events here per year?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
And I know that I've voiced this before, but a lot of what we have seen in the past is them using the Carver County Park and Rec system, and then they say, oh, we're going to have, there's so many different ones. Anyways, we'll have them come here. It's not really something focused on Carver, though. It's something that kind of gets taken out from the county provides this. You can ask them to come in and do this program, but our attendance is always, I'm sorry, I don't like always and never, often very low, and they get canceled. So I think that a more strategic look at what we're doing is really actually important, because we can offer them, but if no one's doing them, then we're missing the mark, right? It's not happening.
And this is outside of that. This
Okay.
is just a separate event, and we thought if the feedback that I took away from the strategic plan was that you wanted to have some type of an event, fill in the blank here, that people would come to. And so we put Chaska Rec because at some point we would, if depending upon the event, we might need logistic help in like setting it up, but it's not contained under the partnership agreement. that we have.
Okay. That's good to know. We do have a lot of these new neighborhoods that are up on the hill, and there's a lot of young families there. And I know back in the day, we used to host the movies in the park with the big inflatable movie. And if you do it a little later in the summer, then it gets dark a little bit earlier. I know some of the problems I had is that we tried to do it in the middle of summer because it's warm, but then it doesn't get dark early, and then we've got young kids.
9:30.
Yeah, and then you've got young kids up late. But they were well attended. I mean, were a couple of hundred people who would show up to those. And now if we're going to have some of these nice newer parks up there, we have some and we're going to be adding on to them, that maybe there's an opportunity for that too. I think with what you're saying, Courtney, that there are definitely some events where having a city information booth is a great idea, like the fire department open house and different things like that. I think some may not be appropriate, maybe if it's the kids event, it depends what it looks like. So I think if we just kind of vet out what the best one is, but I think it's a good idea to have that touch point there too.
And I jumped the slide ahead to activities here, so it seems like that's maybe should be first. Like we're talking about the activities, and then we can determine location too later. So,
and this is more of a logistics for staff. Is this something that you manage then, Brenda, that you'll be managing if we have these programs, or how do you guys see who's going to be managing this in the background to say, okay, we've got this going on, we're going to put this together, here's who we're going to get for the event, here's, we need to have a city booth, or are you going to kind of rely on other entities, whether it's the fire department even within the city or outside?
Right now, I'm thinking of Brenda as our point person, but then depending upon what you want to do, if it's more than one person can handle, then, and depending upon what the resources that are needed, it could, if it's adding something to an event that we already have, then, I think Brenda could take that on. If it's like a brand new, you're going to have food and bounce house and, you're going to expect 100 people, then, we'd want to provide Brenda with some additional resources from probably Chaska Rec to help out with that. So I would say right now this is a blank canvas. If you tell us what you want, then we can tell you what kind of resources we need to dedicate to it.
Okay, and if this does move forward, we have a number of these. I'm not sure how having Chaska staff kind of works in with what the agreement we have now to this, but there are opportunities. I was one of them coming out of college who was looking for the internship, and it's possible then to get somebody who comes out of Park and Rec from college to work as an internship where you can have some help at some point. I'm not saying this year, or we'll just have to see how it goes, but then you have a little bit cheaper help. They're getting the experience, and then it doesn't all rely on Brenda, or adding on costs to our Chaska Park and Rec agreement, which is already fairly expensive. I don't have much more for ideas right now. So.
Just one thing, though, that you said about it might not be appropriate for the city to be involved in some of the more family-friendly things. I'm just thinking, because folks are so into their kids and soccer games and whatever, we never see families or, folks at these meetings, and that's probably a poor comparison, but I'll argue that that's exactly where we need to be, is where kids and families are coming to events, because that's who's moving into our community. So if we're trying to reach that demographic, it doesn't have to be in your face of like, hey, got questions about your water bill, but like if there's a table to be staffed or a booth for them to...
And I didn't mean that it shouldn't be at any family events. That certainly wasn't it. But, I don't know, is the bike rodeo where people are coming in? I think we just have to gauge which one is going to be appropriate, because we don't want to waste time either if it's just not something that is going to work. But I like I said, I think it's a great idea, and I'm certainly not saying that we should exclude family events. It just, I think the type of event will be kind of important to it. I did think of one thing that I want to talk about too, for the historic district downtown in our HPC, after our HPC meeting. I had mentioned to Brent, we have those walking tour guides. But you can only pick them up during the hours at City Hall. So I live downtown, and I see people walking around, stopping in front of houses, trying to peer but not get on their property at the sign that's in front, you know what I mean, to see what year it was. So I had asked Brent to look into having just one of those flap ones that we can put it in on the historic sign at Gazebo Park, especially with all the people having ice cream and things like that. So is there a historic opportunity where we can say, come to Carver and tour the historic downtown and have a little bit more than just, you can go pick up your walking tour brochure at Gazebo, but there might be an opportunity there to bring people down to become acquainted with the historic pieces too.
QR code.
For what?
It would take you to the walking tour on your phone. It would be a little bit of a greener alternative.
We could. We don't have it now on there, but we could. I mean, I don't care how it happens. But I will say there's some of the demographics of the age that I see people walking may not have some of that knowledge on their phones. So having both might be choose the green option or grab this.
That's fair.
But I think it might be a nice idea to see if we can incorporate that somehow.
Yeah, just to kind of go off of that, because I know we have the intention there at the bottom of the slide, right, to coordinate welcome events, to promote community engagement and education. And I like the idea of mixing up different locations within Carver, because a lot of new residents may not know much about the historic district, or may have never been to this park, or seen this facility, or seen the amenities that we have within this fantastic community. And so I like the idea of mixing up the locations just to try to bring people to different areas of the community that they haven't gotten to.
Anybody else?
I do. Can you go back to the slide before locations? What was the one with the 4 main things? Okay, location. I like the idea that the location would be as many as possible, not like everything's always, and then whatever their perception is to fill in the blank. And to add City Hall as a location. As far as new residents that are the stage of life with young families and kind of have like an education booth, maybe it's something where there could be a collaboration with the school, like on their back to school night, because that's often has tables of things similar to school, like book fairs, sports outside of the district. But that might be kind of a way to get in front of new residents. But I mean, all the activities, I don't think any of them are bad. And maybe then for Ironwood Park, maybe a open house. And then you could fit a lot of those activities in there.
So when we say multiple parks collectively as a group, or do you anticipate one per year that we rotate, or one a month, or what does that look like?
I guess for me, I would have a hope for maybe more than one a year, but I don't think it has to be as rigid as saying we're doing one per month. Do one year. If it doesn't work, that's a good reason to switch it up the next year too. But I think a couple a year would be nice.
Quarterly, maybe skip winter.
Maybe. All the quarters except the winter.
I'm trying to think of how we can develop a cadence with what's already existing, right? Because we've got the fire department's open house in September-ish, October, right? October, Steamboat Days is September. Maybe we do early August and late June.
There's Night to Unite as well.
That's August.
I guess I'm kind of struggling. I don't feel like I'm hearing what the council wants. Like, do you want this will probably just be real plain, but I'm thinking, do you want can you go to the slide where you have the events? Do you want the carnival type of, you're getting kids and families to come out and do some activities? Or are you wanting to do a value add to existing events where you're doing booths? Or are you wanting to combine those? I don't think we have the capacity to do any more than one or two of these, frankly. We haven't done any, but I just based on what we're doing right now, in order to do something that I think would meet your expectations, I guess I would like to start with one and see if we can do it really well, and then see how it goes. But I don't know if I am hearing what you want it to be yet.
Yeah. I think in my mind, it can be as simple as an add-on to existing events, so that where we know that folks are already congregating, I really want whatever this event to be is to be, have an element of an introduction to the Carver community, to kind of bring these folks who have lived in Carver for 3 years and have spent 2 of those years hunkered down in quarantine. So kind of introducing folks to the city of Carver. And I don't mean a PowerPoint presentation, because I don't want it to be dull, but just so that they can meet folks and maybe, I guess I'm thinking a little bit more night to unite, of getting out and meeting your neighbors. And also being able to just kind of make connections and feel welcome. I like the idea of moving it to a different park, so that if the folks who are up on the hill had no idea that Lions Park was a thing, that they're exploring new areas of downtown or downtown. As great as I think that this building is, I don't think that City Hall is a good venue for a fun event like this, unless it's a rain location or in case there was inclement weather. But in my mind, it's more of a night to unite type event. So maybe it's something that's early summer, late spring. But I also think if we wanted to start small, I think we could also scratch this itch, if you will, by having a table and staffing some of the existing events.
And I agree that I think it, at least to start, should be mostly that we're piggybacking onto something else, and we have our information booths there. I still wouldn't mind seeing something going on though that's hosted by the city. Again, obviously we don't have a park and rec staff, so I don't think that anyone. I'm sorry. My intention is not to turn you into the park and rec staff either, because you have other duties.
Right.
So when I look at this one, like face painting and carnival games, that doesn't appeal to me so much as maybe, again, along more of the night to unite, or something that happens that can be just kind of that singular event, not multiple vendors that we're coordinating, right? That Brenda Good is now coordinating multiple vendors for this night and things like that. So, but I'm excited to see what other ideas you might come up with too. I don't know that we all have.
Yeah, I feel like I'm hearing, like, did you jump in and disagree, but I feel like I'm hearing you want some of these events, and I think, it's interesting you brought up Chaska Rec. I mean, the intention is for them to do events like this that bring families together, even though that we don't explicitly say have events that bring families together. So I'm almost wondering if it's, maybe Brenda and I meeting with Chaska Rec and making sure that the activities that we have in our agreement are to your expectations and are doing what we're intending them to do. And that when we're having these events, that we get at what you're talking about with, like, if there's a value add to have like a booth, if you will, that we do that in addition. Does that encapsulate what we want to do, rather than, I'm not hearing anything that's like unique about this, like a welcome neighbor event. It's like doing what we're doing with maybe some more intention. Is that fair? Well, feel free to disagree.
Yeah, no, I think it's the yes and though, because I think the Christie's point and the Chaska Rec and the local programming is a little bit separate than the intention of a community event. Because I think that would be out of place of, like, I don't know, archery down in the park, and then there's somebody staffing a booth that nobody's interested in.
No, I'm thinking, like, so the way that is set up is they're supposed to do a number of events that we used to do before COVID hit, obviously, but like the concerts in the park, or there are movies in the park, and that has kind of faded. And so I feel like this is an opportunity to kind of bring some of that back. And then if you want to staff kind of a welcome desk with some literature and have someone there, you certainly could.
Yeah.
Your face isn't looking like
No.
I mean,
So this is just big brainstorming right now. This is pretty,
Yeah,
I mean, this
yeah.
is really out there, so it takes a little.
Yeah, and I think, yes, if we can incorporate, I think more city touch points is what I'm thinking of, at things like the farmer's market and, you know, touch a truck if that becomes a thing again this summer, or the bike rodeo.
how, would it be acceptable for the council if, I feel like what this screams to me is, let's connect back with Chaska Rec and let's tell you what they're planning for this year, and then you can go from there. And then if there's some gaps, then we can identify those and plan for those. If it's covering and then adding to what they have, but I feel like maybe we don't really know what is planned, and so we can come back to you at the next work session and say, well, this is what's planned, and then we can tinker from there.
Does anybody feel differently?
No.
Okay,
Okay, thank you.
do you have what you need from us? I know that.
Yes, we don't need to get into days and times,
Okay,
budget.
no, that's not.
$1
We're
million.
I-
$1 million.
Okay, Brent, can you do strategic plan update in about 4 minutes?
Let's save it to a regular meeting.
Save it, okay. So with that, let's save everything else for the regular meeting. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
A motion by Councilmember Mock.
Second.
And a second by Councilmember Henry. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. All right, we'll see you in a bit.